Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you this day.
Happy hot Monday, Dr. Paul.
Another day.
Another hot day.
Well, maybe it's time to go to the beach, see how the water is. But the beach water in Surfside's probably going to be over 90.
My daughter took some ice into the pool over the weekend because it was too hot.
Yeah, there you go.
I said, that's an expensive way to cool the pool.
Well, let's cool the political atmosphere in this country. Boy, that'd be a job.
That'd be
well, we won't even pretend.
Need a lot of ice.
But we don't do a whole lot, which would be, just politics. But the thing I want to talk about today is significant because it has a lot of importance on how people are thinking. There are different factions about the election coming up. And of course, we hear the difference between them. And frequently I'll point out, well, be careful. The difference isn't all that great. Sometimes they just call it something else. But I think very often their goals are the same. But the fascinating thing going on right now, of course, the first thing is that Republicans are euphoric, and they probably are safe in being euphoric that the election is coming up. But I'm always cautioned because I don't see much changing. Over the years I watched these elections. I can remember listening to the radio with my dad during World War II, and Wendell Willkie being the candidate and FDR. But afterwards, ever since then, everything sort of stays the same. But this one, and I've always resented this argument that this is the most important election ever. But I'm tempted to think along those lines. Things are so bad, and it is so messed up. It is significant, but I think in a year or so from now we'll have to look back and see if the budget is balanced, see if our troops have come home, see if the Fed is gone, see if the budget is balanced. Hey, that's terrible. None of that stuff's going to happen.
That sounds like you're running. Maybe they'll elect you.
Well, that's going to happen. But anyway, the big thing though is that the change. The last election was driven by hate. I'm firm on that. It wasn't policy because obviously Trump was onto something. He won the election. In spite of the people manipulating. Back in 2016, he won the election. So the people were there, but the Democrats just hated his guts because he was not conventional, and he did get the most votes and became president, and they couldn't stand it. But since then, during his campaign, and even now, as if he's never gone away, they still hate his guts.
Visceral.
No, the one reason I don't like anything driven by hate is because I don't think it does any good. I think it's a drain on the people who do the hating, and the person that you're hating, they never change their ways. So I think it's such a silly thing to be driven by hate, and politics is getting worse than ever. This is hate, and it's amazing how the vitriol continues and against Trump again. But now all of a sudden, the hardcore progressives, the Democrats who love to hate Trump, are now, could they ever hate Biden? Oh no, they wouldn't. They wouldn't do that. They're too consistent in their hate. So, but the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN, they say, well, this guy might have problems. He stumbles a little bit, and it's not always a physical stumble. So they're a definite change here, I would say, in the last month or so. But it seems like it didn't just happen here and a little bit here and there. It seems like there's a crescendo. That it's a building, and there's much more anti-Biden noise out there, which means to me that the Democrats are through with Biden. but they don't know what to do. And all I can say, well, you created your own problem. You know, it was your hate toward Trump. They gave you Biden. Anybody, we'll take Biden. And then of course they didn't do very well on picking their vice president either.
Yeah.
So now they're in a real dilemma. How do we get rid of Biden without allowing our vice president to become president? So it's sort of, I don't lose sleep over worrying about their problems.
Yeah.
I worry about theirs. I don't get enough sleep when I worry about where the country's going if we don't change some of our attitudes about the issues that are important. But there is no doubt that the ruling by the Supreme Court has really stirred up the animosity.
Yeah.
So here, the big picture, the motivation for the hate and the distortion and the whole reason of the campaign is that we have to have really, really easy access to killing the unborn.
Yep.
Isn't it amazing that is the driving force? Yeah. It's not nuclear weapons or foreign policy or bankruptcy or COVID anymore. It is just the fact that there's some interference. There are some delays now because our government, our court system has responded, I think, pretty much in a constitutional way. This is a difficult problem, the abortion issue. They didn't outlaw it, and all the noise and lying about what they did do just it doesn't hold water, because that is not what they have done. And they are determined that this is the biggest issue. But politically, is it the best thing they can do for their campaign?
Yeah.
Because they probably have, I imagine, this is a guess, 25% that vote on only this issue, because even the right to life probably down to 25%. I think people, I've said it before, and I still believe it, ultimately when the people go to the polls, they vote not from their brains or their heart, they vote from their bellies.
Yeah.
And they're worried about their financial outcome, and it's about the economy and about their whether or not they have a job. So, but this is I see it growing. It's a big deal. The Democrats are in a real dilemma, and I wished I could get more excited about what the alternative is going to be, but all we can do is we can theorize and say, now, if we had something to say, what the replacement should be like, we can entertain those thoughts and have a little fun doing it. But I also know that if you don't talk about it, if you don't know about it, and you don't describe it, and you don't work for it, there's no chance that anything will improve, because nobody will have perfect liberty or perfect communism. But one thing for sure, if we do nothing at the rate it's going right now, as the conditions worsen, I think government is going to grow and make all our problems worse.
Like you say, it would be nice to have a second party, because while you're right, they are rubbing their hands with glee, the Republicans that is. They can't wait to get in the saddle in November. It's not because they have a lot of new ideas or a lot of superior ideas. It's just because, darn it, it's our turn. We want to be at the helm right now. And we know that because on the real issues, where there are some real areas where Republicans can forge a different policy, they're identical to the Democrats. I mean, the wasting of tens of billions of dollars in Ukraine, and I saw an article saying the level of spending is getting up to the Afghanistan war level of spending. This money being flushed down the drain is a huge issue that Republicans could pounce on, because, as you say, you could easily tie it to voting with your belly. This is why you are paying $6 a gallon. It's not Putin's price hike, it's Biden's price hike. All of these things are falling in their lap, but they generally agree with the Democrats about war. They don't want to run on being anti-war, even though they have a good example, on and on from Trump. But even back to Obama, he basically ran as one opposed to Bush's stupid war in Iraq, and that propelled him into the presidency, from where he began to launch his own stupid wars, of course. But so when it comes down to the big issues like this, it's literally dropped into their lap. deal with the foreign policy, the economics, and they say, no, we're going to deal with Hunter Biden and his crack pipe or what have you.
I know some people are listening to us, only a few. They're saying, well, you guys are off the track because there's a lot of difference. But once again, just as you summarized it once there, that foreign policy, there's not a major difference, on the foreign policy, in the military-industrial complex and all of that. But what about the trade policy? Trade policy really is a foreign policy because we believe that the more you trade and travel and interact with other countries, the less likely you are to have war with them.
Of course.
So, and what did we do? It was the Republican Party that actually repopularized the whole issue of sanctions and tariffs.
Yeah.
There was a time when conservatives and liberals, economists and politicians, we don't believe in tariffs, we don't believe in free trade, and the sanctions shouldn't be used like this. But so right now, those issues still exist.
And here's what here's what we're mostly talking about. And this is something we noticed on Zero Hedge, and we've seen it elsewhere. You see it all over Twitter, everywhere you go. But the Democrat mainstream media, the pro-Biden mainstream media, has turned against the president. I think it's very, very clear. We can put up the first one. These are all from the Zero Hedge article, which you can find in the first or second page of Hedge. But this is a tweet from Stephen Miller. This is from the New York Times. At 79, Biden is testing the boundaries of age and the presidency. The next one, CNN. Now, these are the stations that carry the water for Biden all along. They made excuses for him hiding in his basement. Here's CNN. After a string of Supreme Court setbacks, Democrats wonder whether Biden White House is capable of urgency moment demands. And so you see and there's plenty of other examples in the article, but basically, all of a sudden, the things you're not supposed to talk about, which is that Biden seems to be having some problems, his administration doesn't seem to be functioning. They believe, obviously CNN at least, that the Supreme Court decisions should finally give the Democrats a raison d'etre, right? Something that they can really run on. Yes, they're denying women the rights. They're putting a gun in every baby's hand as soon as it comes out of the womb, right? But the White House hasn't been very effective in capitalizing on it. So when they're losing the mainstream media, it does make you wonder, we talked about before the show, what do they have in mind? What do the mainstream media have in mind now that they're trying to hobble him?
One thing that the Democrats that don't like Biden now are most upset is Biden's reaction to the Supreme Court ruling.
Yeah.
That's the big issue, and that's why the people are out on the streets right now. And once again, what strikes me is so weird, that's a big issue. I have a strong position on it, but over the years, I've debated people, we look at it, and we had an opinion about having the states have more to say about it. But this whole thing, this is the issue, the issue of the day, and they're out in the streets if we don't accomplish this, if we don't facilitate it, but then they have to turn it around and distort and lie about exactly what this ruling said. Because it changed the jurisdiction, is what it did. And it does make a difference, but it is much closer to what was intended by the Constitution, how you handle difficult situations, and that's why it's such a shame that this has turned into this. But I think I can't help but think that how the Democrats are reacting to this, I can't believe there's a political benefit to this, but I may be biased by this because I disagree with them. But they think this is a winner, and that to me is the sad part about it. How if this is the issue of facilitating abortion as the major issue of the world today, that's a different story. The other statistic that's come out as this debate went on is when the women who the radical progressives have turned out, I'm going to have to move, I'm going to have to go over here, I'll go down here and have an abortion. It turns out that we might have more lax abortion laws than the rest of the world, even European, that we think as those wild-eyed progressives over there. And some of those countries still have a lot more restrictions on abortion than we do.
It's very interesting. The thing that they don't realize, the blue state people, they can't stand the fact that there are things called red states where people are more conservative and they don't believe that abortion is a good thing. The solution to the problem for the progressives, for the Dems on this, is simple. What we've been talking about for a long time is secession. Whether it's de facto or whatever, however you have it, secession. You go your way and we'll go ours. And I think that is the essence of the Supreme Court decision. Not that we're going to have a war between the states, but that, hey, if you are a blue state and you like this, then that's fine. But what's interesting, just to return to our first topic, is in addition to the mainstream media seemingly turning against Biden and bringing up issues of age and cognitive ability, et cetera, you're also seeing, I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, you're also seeing these Hunter Biden videos coming out, which are extremely disturbing, to say the least. It's not a person of high moral character. I won't go into the details, but I do wonder if all of a sudden why these are coming out now, particularly when you talk about business connections with his father, if this is maybe the preparation for a way to get rid of poor old Joe.
Yeah, and that seems to me like a very likely possibility, but the smoothness that they don't have is their problem, because they can't do that without a great deal of effort. That is the whole reason why these people continue to build up and build hate in order to motivate the people to stick by these positions. And ultimately, though, as discouraging as it is, as we mentioned, there's not enough, bipartisanship. People don't stand up and state what their positions are, and they do, but they're in both parties. Is the problem. But we still have enough freedom to see that the philosophy that is important can energize enough people to come out and demonstrate and say, peacefully demonstrate and say, we've had enough of this. We've had enough of lockdown. And that is the way the Vietnam War ended. Yeah. It ended in a disaster, a surrender, admission of all the stupidity and needless deaths. So that, but the people showed up. But of course it wasn't war, but it was war on the streets in this country. There was a lot of killing here and a lot of violence and a lot of competition there. So there's reason for us to keep, encouraging people to stand up and do what they did when they were annoyed with lockdown, or if they get tired of any of these other issues. Maybe it'll be just, if the media, if his own friends, if Biden's own friends are turning against him and say, hey, we can't defend this guy anymore, maybe there's going to be a groundswell by Democrats. And that's what I think is happening. They have to get rid of him. They cannot have him running against Trump in 2 years. That is not going to happen. They'll force a resignation or something, and I think they will not have Trump, and they are not going to have Harris run. They have to clean house, and I just hope the Republicans aren't I hope they're not inept so badly that they can't, encourage it without digging a hole for themselves.
Well, I think the other shoe to watch to drop will be if the mainstream media starts grabbing onto some of these Hunter Biden stories, and they haven't thus far. But could you imagine if a video emerged of Donald Trump Jr. walking around naked with a gun in one hand, a bag of crack cocaine in the other, in a room full of prostitutes, right? Oh, they wouldn't mention that out of deference to his privacy, right? So we'll have to see what happens there. But we should move on, because we could probably talk about this for a long time. But we should talk a little bit about the Europeans, because I think this is also very important. You can put that next clip up. And we've mentioned this before, but these are polling coming out of Europe. And this is again from Hedge. Majority of Europeans are unwilling to pay the price to defend democracy in Ukraine. And we're seeing this all over Europe, Dr. Paul. We see it in the farmers' protests. We're seeing it in collapsing governments from Estonia to Albania to the UK. We're seeing more and more of this. And you can see this is a Eurobarometer poll that came out a little while ago. We can do this next one and just look at the numbers here. Are you willing to pay more in energy prices for sanctions to Russia against the Ukraine situation, 58 people said no on energy prices, and 59% said no on food prices across Europe. They are not, by a significant majority, almost 6 in 10, are not willing to pay the price for attacking Russia economically. And I just want to show one other thing before I send it over to you, Dr. Paul. If we can put on that next clip, because this is incredible, and this is why Europeans are revolting, in a manner of speaking. This is from the Bild am Sonntag, the news on Sunday. Some cities in Germany are planning to open special public spaces during the cold season where it will be possible to warm those who cannot cope with rising utility prices during the crisis. This is Germany, Dr. Paul, and you can imagine what it must feel like to Germans to see themselves as the once powerhouse, economic powerhouse of Europe. They were powering all of Europe, and now they're huddled communally in heated rooms because they can't afford to pay their own heating bills. Psychologically, that must be torturous.
Well, you know, the one picture I saw the other day in the United States is a bit disturbing too. That there was a church that wanted to help the homeless, and they were providing homes for them, but they were big boxes, what they were.
Yeah.
But they look.
I saw that. They look nice.
Yeah, they look like a house and all this, but yeah, how many square feet? Maybe enough for 2 sleeping bags or something like that. So that is all a result of mismanagement that we've depended on by government, and that's why we have to eventually change all that. From that article you mentioned, I want to read one sentence, because we have frequently mentioned that just the issue of inflation is a tax on the people, is a sinister tax, and it usually affects the poor and the middle class most because the prices go up, and that's where the real tax is. But in this article, and this is international, they're talking about on Zero Hedge, both Ukraine and Russia are among the world's biggest exporters of wheat and other grains. That's pretty significant. The conflict is threatening food security across the globe, especially in the poorer regions that rely on imports from both countries. Yeah. So all this mischief, all this thing happens. The people that we know that are in the political class, and we pointed it out so often when they wrote all the laws for lockdown, they themselves never followed it, and they never suffered the same way. But this is just another point. And this is mainly dealing with the food shortages, but what about the energy shortages? The thing that baffles me is, why have the Europeans been so willing, to go along with some of our advice and our participation? Oh yeah, let's just quit. Let's just put on, tariffs on Russian oil. Oh yeah, that'll bring them to their knees. It brought them to their pocketbooks, and their pocketbooks, they had to get a new pocketbook. They were making so much money. So, but they continue to do the same thing over and over again, which is a tragedy.
But I think the Europeans are starting to get frustrated with this. I had Jeff Deist on the show Thursday when you were playing hooky, and and he made the great point that, yes, there's a lot of pain in Western Europe and in the U.S. over rising food prices, and that's going to be very uncomfortable for our pocketbooks. But while we are struggling to make ends meet and eating, people in Africa and the developing world are not going to be eating. So as you suggest in that line,
I know.
It's a big deal.
And this gives food for the people who believe in population control. Bill Gates will say, look, this is what I've been telling you. That's why I'm going to buy up the land, and nobody can touch it. No, you can't grow anything. But it's Malthusism, and I was taught once about Malthus that sounded good, but it didn't really work, and it was totally unnecessary. That was many, many years before they had modern farming. And but the only thing is that there are problems. But the big problem is that they let government economic planning manage it, and that's where the real trouble comes in.
Yeah.
So.
Well, let's put on that next clip if you can, because this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. Spent a lot of time living in this country, and this is Hungary, and this is something we notice on Hedge. U.S. retaliates against Hungary for obstructing the 15% global minimum tax. And you wonder, wow, Hungary, well, they must be having that tax up at 40 or 50%, and we're mad at them. No, they had it down to 9%, and we said, Hungary, you better raise those taxes or you're going to get in trouble.
Yeah, that's it, because they had just recently, and not too distant past, the corporate tax rate was 19. They took it down to 9.
Yeah.
They should be praised. But here we are, the champions of liberty, and as they say, democracy, which annoys me to no end, because it is the authoritarianism of the dictatorship of the democracies that people use, because they can intimidate and regulate and control, a majority vote. So this is such a shame. 15% of the global minimum tax on corporate income, but there's two things here: taxes, that's the issue, but the other part that is so bad is the globalism. You have to comply. You can't stand out. You can't do what's your own. That's why it's so annoying to see the European countries roll over. And they're rolling over less now than they used to, but I always predicted the European Union won't work, because I just figured there was a lot of independent thinking culturally and socially that just won't bring them together. But economically, it means they don't generally agree on economic and tax policy. Besides, the purpose of the various states in this country, and it's worked here, say on the abortion issue, that you have a freedom to go to different places. If you're really messing up, go to a state that's better managed. Yeah. But in Europe, they now have a lot less of that, even though they say we are a European country and we can go and travel and work where we want. Well, it hasn't worked out quite as well as they had hoped.
And I think there's a little bit more than meets the eye to this. The Biden administration announced it's going to terminate this 43-year-old treaty with Hungary in protest of them refusing to implement the 15% corporate minimum tax. As you say, they went down to 9. This is one of the pillars of Biden's Build Back Better plan, which I'm sure is doing very well. But I think there are other issues here. Hungary has been very reluctant to shoot itself in the head over sanctions against Russia. They get a lot of their energy from Russia, and they're not super eager to freeze to death over the winter. Imagine that. And they also have refused to allow transshipment of weapons. They don't want to be part of this war in any way, and part of that, of course, is because you have a big group of ethnic Hungarians living inside Ukraine's borders. There are a lot of other issues, but that infuriates Biden and the Biden administration. They want all these little countries to be just in lockstep. That's exactly how Moscow was for 70 years of the Soviet Union. All the little satellites need to be in lockstep with what Moscow says. Well, now Washington wants that same thing. And Hungary, under Viktor Orban, has said no consistently. The European Union wanted to settle millions of refugees everywhere, and Hungary said, no, we're going to pass on that. And that infuriated them. So they have gone their own way on many things. And I think this is a retaliation from the Biden administration for a number of different reasons.
And they're on the right track, and they're doing so much better than the others, but they still got too close and things rubbed off on them, because to even exist, all of a sudden there's the transfer of wealth from one country to another. So they're, when they had lockdown and the war in Ukraine, all of a sudden there were some financial burdens, for their government, the Hungarian government. So they're saying, well, we need a little bit of a reimbursement.
Yeah.
We participated, and that's probably a mixed bag, but I think I can understand how you get into those traps. But it also is the argument for our case. Don't get that close. You got to get too close, and they're not going to treat you fairly. If you're, they'll treat you right if you do exactly what they say, and that's what the government is. That's what our government's doing right now with our corporations.
Yeah.
That's why we have this corporatism, because they have so much of a clout over our business community. The businessman has to toe the line and do what the government says, on the lockdown and all the silliness that they have, or we will punish you, and they have so much power now to punish. Freedom should be free, and it shouldn't be a participant in worldwide government globalism, and you don't need much government to live in a free society, I'll tell you.
You know, our good friend Colonel McGregor at the very beginning of this conflict predicted it would signal the end of the EU and NATO. And I think we may see this because it's all fine and dandy when that gravy train from Germany is spreading out euros everywhere. But that gravy train has run out of coal, it's run out of steam, and it's sputtering to a halt. And when the goodies stop flowing, there's going to be a real day of reckoning. And I think that's probably what we're seeing, or going to be seeing here pretty soon.
Well, we should consider that point. When will we run out of our ability to flood the world with Federal Reserve notes? And right now, we've been able to get away with that for many, many decades because we can print the reserve currency of the world. So I would say we will run out too when the world gives up on the dollar as being the world currency. But the conditions are such now that everybody else has been messed up so bad, they're still working with the dollar. Yeah. But then who's talking about gold and other alternatives for purchases? And that's Russia and China. That's what really infuriates the people because they can't do that. They're stealing capitalism from us. We want to have more control of them. So.
Well, I'm going to close out, if that's okay, and just put on that next clip. I'm going to remind our viewers, if you or someone you know are an upper division undergrad or grad student, apply today to be a 2022 Ron Paul Scholar. And you'll see this is the front page of the Ron Paul Institute, ronpaulinstitute.org. You can click on that link. Here's a picture of Representative Massey doing the keynote speech last year. We just signed on a couple of new professors that we have not had before, and I'm super excited. They're both really great people who I admire. It's going to be a very, very good, it's a one-day seminar for these students. The day before our Washington conference, these students will be allowed to participate in the Washington conference. There is a scholarship available to those who are selected to defer the costs of attending thanks to our generous donors. So what do you have to lose? Be a 2022 Ron Paul Scholar. There's a lot of competition, but here's the good news. The application is pretty easy. So go over there, click on the link, do your best, and we look forward to seeing you. We've already had 2 classes. This will be our 3rd class. I think I love this program. I think it's great, and we're really excited. And also the last clip, just to remind everyone, get your tickets, Anatomy of a Police State, September 3rd, 2022 at the Westin Washington Dulles Airport. Great speakers. We announced last week that our good friend Jeff Deister of the Mises Institute will be joining us. We have a bunch of other announcements to make of other speakers, but why wait? Get your tickets today. Get the early bird special. Save some money, less than last year, and come join us. So, Dr. Paul?
Very, very good. Very good. And I want to finish up with talking up and following up on this issue of the political system driven by hate. And we certainly have seen that. And there's no monopoly on it, but obviously there was one side that a lot more than the other. But on the philosophy, I think the 2 parties agree way too much. And now the contest is only on power. And that's when the love and the hate can be hated and distorted to keep the power. And there's a contest going on in that about who can hate the most. And it's real easy for me to remind myself that hate is not worth anything. Hate, I'm a very, very selfish person. Everybody has a natural tendency to want to take care of themselves and take care of their families. And some people might call that selfishness. But in a way, it's looking to your own responsibility to care for oneself and your family. And I think the best way to do that is to avoid the temptation to really get annoyed with these terrible people who want to provoke you by just bugging you and really are hateful, and they use political power to do it because it takes too much energy. That doesn't mean you have to accept it. It means you have to work harder and you have to use a technique of bringing people together and pointing out the fallacy of their ideas. That, to me, will preserve the ability to do that. But if it's driven by hate, and I think that's where the Democrats are right now, everything's been driven by hate, and they're falling apart. But they don't have a monopoly of this position. But right now, they're in a mess. So all the hate, they expend, all the energy they expended, during Trump's campaign before 2016, and what he did in the office and what he's doing now. It's a negative. It is people who think that, well, I can return more hate than they can, and that's going to enhance me, and then I can beat them because I'm going to be more hateful and I'll have more power. Guess what? It backfires on it. Those individuals end up short. And I think that's what's happened, to the progressive era. We've complained about the progressives unwilling to be civil libertarians anymore. They don't want to be allies with the libertarians. They don't. They're not. Progressives on wars. They are more anxious to be part of the military-industrial complex. These whole things. So the hate drives it in the wrong direction. And besides, you get a bonus. You feel a little bit better about it because there's a cost when you put all your energy into hating people and think you can gain peace and prosperity that way. We have a different solution for gaining peace and prosperity, and that is the promotion of liberty. Thank you for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.